So let's get out of that. Let's get over to the layers information. Let me bring over our folder that I cannot find. Hold on. Let me pull it up for this lecture. For some reason, it went away on me. I probably closed it and forgot that I closed it. I am good for that because, I'm me. All right, lecture number 6, layers management and blends. So first I want to show you these guides folder. So you'll have a link in Blackboard that will link you to this guides folder. Inside of this folder, you will have a couple of PDFs. One of it, 3 different PDFs. One of it is just a simple guide on how the layers panel works and what's involved. Basically, the things that we're going to be talking about, just in a very uh, basic way. So that way you get kind of a reminder of what we're going to be talking about today. Then, when it comes to the blend modes, there are 2 files for that. One is this one come from Colleen Smith about Photoshop Cafe. That's a website, by the way, if you look that up, photoshopcafe.com, I believe. And this guy, Colin Smith, has a lot of tutorials there and information there on Photoshop-based things and shows you how to make cool things like this guitar on fire and such. So he goes over the color blend modes in this particular PDF. So they're going to show you visually the different blend modes that are there and tries to explain to you what the blend mode is doing, so you get kind of an idea of what it should, give you an example, kind of what it should do for you. So you get kind of an idea of it. You also have, some examples of them being used to kind of, again, to give you a base idea. It's not perfect with what it's showing you. Blend modes are one of those things that you have to use it in order to get better at it. But they are some good things. And of course, he's going to sell things to you as well. So there'll be some of that into the PDF. Now, besides that one, which is more of a visual explanation, if you want something a lot more technical, there's this PDF, which again is just pages talking about every blend mode and giving you the math that's involved in it and how it kind of works in just a different way to explain it. So either way, you'll get your information. So that's the guides folder when you want to take a look at that. We are going to be also having this class files folder that is going to have all these different files in it that I'm going to work through right now and in class to kind of show you how layers work. All right. And then later on, I'll show you the project that I'm going to have you do, at least the project brief, because when it comes to projects, you don't actually have files to work with. I did that kind of on purpose because I want you to be a little more creative with the projects. All right. So when you have a new document that you create, when you create that new document, if the background contents, you leave it to white or some other color, you're going to get one layer created in your layers palette called background. If you use transparent, and I want to do this twice. So one time in my layers palette here that I have on my right-hand side, I get a layer called background with a padlock. If I make a new document, do this again, and the background contents, I change from a color and I make it transparent instead. When I create this new document, I get one layer, it's just called layer one. All right. Difference between them. When you pick a color like white, you have this background layer. This background layer is your original information in this new document you have. Technically, everything that makes up this file right now is this one layer background. You want to treat any file that you get where you have this one layer called background, treat that like you can't touch it. You can use your selection tools to select something on it, but you can't paint, you can't draw, you can't apply a filter, you can't cut, copy, paste, and all that sort of thing. You can do those things if you want to, but you have the potential of destroying your original information, and that becomes a bad thing. If I open a file, just a picture of some sort, I'm going to show you this here. File to open, and I don't know what that screenshot is. So I'm going to go and find my class folder. 110. Go into the lecture folder. Go to lecture 6. And inside of there, go to the lecture class files. I'm just going to open up any one of these pictures. It doesn't really matter which one of the pictures they are. Any file that you open up that is already a photo of some sort, and it's only the one layer, just the photo itself, you will get the same thing. You'll get your layers palette, and in your layers palette, there'll be that one layer called background with the padlock on it. That is your original information. So it is very, very important with an existing file like this, not just a new document, that you always remember that that background layer is your original information, it's your original data. You cannot do anything to it, or you should not do anything to that layer. Meaning, I should not grab my paintbrush tool and just start painting, because now what I've done is I've replaced the pixels that were there that made up this photo, and I've just replaced it with this little red swipe that I just did. That's a bad thing, because if I save this file right now and close this file, when I open it back up, I'm stuck with whatever's here, and I can't recover that information. So you never want to do anything directly to this layer for this photo. Even for a new document, you want to kind of have that same thought process. Even though it's just a white background or whatever color you pick, you want to still treat it and think about it that way. So that way you keep yourself in that habit that this is your original file, this is your original information, your original data. You don't want to do anything destructive to it. When you have a new document that doesn't have that background, you choose transparent. You just get a regular transparent layer. So it's just a transparent sheet of nothing right now. The pixels don't have anything in it. It's just complete transparent. That's why you see the gray and white checkerboard here. Mine is darker because I decided I didn't like the gray and white color. I just wanted kind of darker gray and lighter gray. So that's why I get this. You will probably, and I think I went with smaller squares instead of the bigger squares. But that's something that you can go into and kind of change if you want to. It's a preference thing. Hold on. Oh no, that's terrible. I thought there was a right click way where if you don't have anything here, you could right click and get to something, but I don't see it. Anyway, for Windows people, if you go to your edit menu, and Mac folks like myself, if you go to this application menu here, you'll get the settings, and under settings, you got essentially a bunch of preferences that you can go and change. And one of them is under this transparency and gamut, where the transparency part is like the size of the grid squares and the grid colors that you can modify if you want to and kind of change that up. Why you would do that? Just because of preference. You feel like doing it. That's why it's called preferences. You feel like doing these things. So most of these things you would do. If anyone's interested, let me know. Shoot me an email or something like that, or in the discussions or whatever. Let me know if you want me to go through those preferences and like be specific about what's there. Like go in here and change this, change that. Here's why. Here's reasons. If you're interested in that, let me know. Normally, I don't go through that because it becomes very subjective. Like you change it because you feel like doing this, and sometimes you're just changing it just to be changing it, just because. But not important. Anyway, let me get rid of these files here because I don't need those blank documents. Let's get to this one. Now, some tutorials that you will run into will tell you to do a very, in my opinion, doofus thing. They'll tell you to go to the layers palette immediately as soon as you open the picture and double click on this layer and change its name from background to layer 0 or whatever name you want to give it. What does that do? Well, when you do that, it makes the layer a regular layer. Notice that it's not called background anymore. Notice that the padlock is gone. Why has that happened? Well, you've just released and unlocked this layer so you can technically do whatever you want to with it. It's not protected anymore. Why is that important? Well, because some people just like doing that for whatever reason, and they think that's kind of cool. I don't think that's kind of cool. It's just something that I would prefer not to do. Um, in the process of working in Photoshop. So let me undo this. I would never do that. That's just me. What can I do instead? Well, there's actually a few different choices. One way, so you don't mess up your original information, is to simply file and do a save as or the save a copy. So if you're doing save as, the idea is that you're saving this as a different name and possibly a different location. So um, so as soon as you do the save as, it's going to point to your original location that you pulled the picture from. If you change the name, you could save it without saving over top of the original. If you change the location, you could use the same name you started with, and you would be able to just not save over top of the original. You can always change the file format as well. Change it to Photoshop. If this was a JPEG file, if I change it to Photoshop, I could save it in the same location that I started with, and it would not save on top of the original file. So that's one thing, so you don't save over your original. Another way of doing the same thing is under file, there is save a copy. The difference between save as and save a copy has to deal with the file formats you can save into. So Mac and Windows, when you do save as, you'll have a certain number of different file types you could choose. When you do save a copy, you'll have a different limit. And Mac and Windows is slightly different. So about that particular limit of what format you could save it into. Like a Mac, I could still save it as a Photoshop file, even though I'm doing save a copy. All right. The other thing that happens is it puts the word copy in the name. So you're not again saving over the original. It's saving a copy, and it'll just have that word copy tagged into the name, the file name, so it doesn't save over the original. A lot of people that like to make different versions of the same file like using the save a copy concept because it'll save a duplicate of the file without saving over top of the original accidentally. The problem is that when you do it again, it'll be whatever the file name is, copy, copy, and then copy, 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 and then copy, 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 copy. And it just becomes long if you don't change the name at all. But that's another way to do it. Third way. So you got the save as, save a copy. Another way that happens, you can go to your image menu and there will be duplicate. So image and duplicate, what is that? This is making a copy of this file, but not saving it yet. So you're just making a copy of the same file with all its layers and everything else in it. It's just created as another folder tab. So you see I got Austrian Vineyard copy here, and then Austrian Vineyard is the original. So this copy hasn't been saved yet. It's just here created. And then what can happen is I can take the original, close it because I don't need it anymore because I have a copy here that I can do what I need to or want to with it, and then have that saved. Um, so I could do that if I wish to go about with that process. I like doing that a little bit more because A, uh, just like I mentioned before, I'm not saving over the original. B, later on, I can just do file and save or save as, and I could then save it some location, change the name, anything like that. The word copy that shows up in the name triggers to my brain that this is a duplicate of my original, and I don't have the original anymore showing. So I got the duplicate there. So then I know that I need to change the name or change where I'm saving it or choose a different file type or anything like that. It's just a matter of how you build your workflow, for what you're used to. Final way is to duplicate the layer. So in the same file, the original or duplicate, however you want to do it, you go to the file itself in the layers palette and you duplicate the file. So duplicating a file, again, Adobe gives you multiple ways of doing the simplest thing. My favorite is right clicking. I can right click on the name of the layer. When I right click on the name of the layer, duplicate layer is one of the options that pop up. When I choose duplicate layer, it gives you the ability to give this new layer a name. It'll just have the name of the file, whatever the name of the layer is with the word copy after it, but you could change it to something else. Remember earlier in earlier lectures, I talked about naming conventions, making sure you name things properly. This is your chance to follow within that naming convention, all caps or all small cap or, all capitals or all lowercase. mixing the case around. Spaces, don't use spaces. Follow your naming convention that you create. But this gives me a chance to give this a name and hit OK. And it's another layer that just gets created above the original background layer. And boom, I'm ready to go. This layer here, Vineyard, I can do whatever I want to with it. I can paint on it like I did before. I can spindle, mutilate it, destroy it, do whatever I want to this layer. It doesn't touch the original. All right. So if I mess this one up, who cares? I can just throw it away. I can right click and there'll be delete layer. There's also the trash can at the bottom of the layers panel that you can click onto or drag that layer to throw it away, to get rid of that layer, and then start the process of duplicating all over again. Now, there's another way of duplicating this layer that's quicker and that I like to use when I want to duplicate the entire layer. And I'll show you the menu command for it first, and then show you the keyboard shortcut. So under your layer menu bar, all the way at the top, under the layer menu, when you go to new, you'll see layer via copy. So you'll never see duplicate layer up here, but you'll see this layer via copy. What this is doing, and remember the keyboard shortcut that shows here. This is on a Mac. It's the command key and the letter J. Um, that keyboard shortcut has been in existence for years before the menu command came up. There's a thing called Easter eggs. Basically, when programmers write code to create a program, sometimes they throw these little fun things in there called Easter eggs that nobody else will pick up on unless it's the person who helped create this, or when they put new code on top of old code, these things kind of pop in. So one of them was Control J or command or Control J if you're on Windows, Command J if you're on Mac, would do what is called a jump command. That's what they used to call it. And it would just jump whatever layer you got selected to a new layer. No, simple copy paste kind of thing without having to do copy paste. So layer via copy was just a menu command they inserted in finally, like in Photoshop 6 or something like that. When the powers of Adobe finally figured it out. But that makes a duplicate of the layer. It'll be called layer 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, whatever the next number is. You could do this Control J as many times as you want to make as many extra layers as you want. That's an exact duplicate of whatever's on that layer. It works with any layer, not just the background layer. It can work with any of them to create it, and they'll just be numbered off, layer whatever with the word copy after it, to make more and more and more. When you create these duplicate layers, obviously the file size of the whole document gets bigger because you're holding on to more and more information, but that is not really a concern about yours unless your computer crashes a lot. You're going to be using multiple layers for multiple things in what you're doing. If you don't need a layer, so duplicating a layer allows you to duplicate a layer. Let's say you've made a mistake and you want to get rid of that layer. If it was the very last thing you did, of course you can do Control Z or Command Z to undo it. But you can also just hit delete on your keyboard and it will actually delete whatever layer you have selected without prompting you and asking you if that's what you want to do. It'll delete everything but the last background layer. So be careful with using that button to get rid of layers. I mentioned the trash can down there at the bottom, or right clicking to say delete layer. If you right click on a layer and say delete it, it will just go away, but it will prompt you and ask you this question here first to see if that's what you really want to do. This do not show again, that shows up in a lot of different little dialog boxes like that. I usually don't check that because in class, when I'm teaching this, I need to get people to be able to see that. For your own personal computer, yeah, go ahead and say do not show again so it doesn't show it anymore. But that way, when you hit yes or no, that'll be what happens from that point forward with the deletion. So right clicking and say delete will bring that message up. If you click on a layer, then click on the trash can down here, that will bring that message up. But if you just drag that layer down here on top of the trash can, just drag your cursor on top of the trash can down here, it wipes that layer out without you being prompted because apparently that's what you wanted to do. If you make that as a mistake, you can always undo it to bring that layer back if you delete it by accident. So you have those options available to you too. All right, so far so good. Base information about the layers palette. Now, making a new layer. At the bottom of the layers palette, there is a button that looks like a square with a plus sign. This is the universal new button. So what does that mean? That means that any layer in any of these programs in the Adobe family, whenever you see that button in a panel of some sort, it allows you to make something new. So if I go to swatches panel, all right, I'll see that button, the little universal new button, the little square with the plus sign, allows me to make a new color swatch when I click on it. If I go to the channels palette, I'll see it there. Adjustments, no, it's not there on there. Adjustments, patterns, it's there. Gradients, it's there. Depending on the panel, but anytime you see that little button, it allows you to make something new. In this case, makes a new layer. All right. The new layer is going to be called layer 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or what have you. When you double click onto the name of the layer, it will allow you to give that layer a name. So you can call it whatever you want to. I usually name the layers based on what is on the layer. So if it's blank like this, I leave it alone as far as the name. I don't worry about it for the moment. But once I start painting, let's say I want the sky to be red. So then, I can paint with my paintbrush since that's what I have loaded as my paintbrush color. I can paint the sky area here. And I'm being very, very rough because this is not how I would do this, but I'm just showing you something. So I'd paint over that whole area, and then I can go back and double click on the layer and call it red sky or something, with whatever naming convention that I want to call it. And then I can do all sorts of things like we talked about. I'm going to talk about the layer blend modes to kind of fulfill it out and that sort of thing, and opacity, that you can do. There's a bunch of stuff, but the name is going to be very important. So name the layer according to what's on it and to what you see. Um, if I mess up, that layer is free from everything, so I can always delete it and get rid of it when I don't need it anymore. If I feel that I don't need it any longer. But I can use it as part of the compilation and that sort of thing as I see fit. Size of these thumbnails. Let's talk about that. You have the ability to right click in this empty space underneath the background layer there. If you right click in this empty space, you have the ability to make the thumbnails as large as you want them to be. And let me go back to painting. Hold on a second. Let me make the new layer again. And let me paint back on here again because I want you to see this instead of me just talking about it. When you put something on a blank layer, you got two ways of being able to view that layer over in the layers palette. The way I have mine set up right now, I'm just clipping the thumbnail to the layer bounds, meaning I'm only seeing on layer 1 right now the space that I painted. If I paint more down here, like down at the bottom, watch when I let go of my mouse, watch what happens to that layer 1's thumbnail. See how it gets bigger? It gets bigger because I painted more information down here at the bottom versus before I just had the information there at the top. So it's a little bit shorter. So that's this option here, clip thumbnails to layer bounds. I like that. Some people do, some people don't. By default, it's set up to where the thumbnail is going to the document bound. So depending on how big the document is, that shows, the whole full size of the thumbnail. How you work is how you work. How you want to view this is how you want to view it. Some people don't want the thumbnails at all. They just have the layer names with these little icons next to it. I think they're weird people because this is real tiny. And I'm an old man, so these tiny little writing and these tiny little, squares don't work for me. I think by default this thing is set to medium on the thumbnails. I always put it to large because it's easier for me to see the individual thumbnails for what's on them. And so that way I can name them and all that sort of stuff as I feel like I need to. All right, so we talked about naming the layers. We talked about the size of the thumbnails on the layers. Let's talk about visibility and stack order. So before I can get into that, let me make another new layer and let me change to a different color to paint with on this second layer. And I'm just, setting this up where they kind of slightly overlap and that sort of thing here. So now I got a second layer, layer 2, and I got this one layer, layer 1. So let's call layer 1 here red, and let's call layer 2 here blue. So I can double click on the layers to give them names. Now, let's talk visibility. Next to the thumbnail of each one of these layers is an eyeball. That eyeball denotes visibility of the layer. Clicking onto the eyeball will make that particular layer disappear. It's still part of the composition. You just don't see it right now. So it's temporarily hidden. You can still select the layer. You can still do limited, limited things to the layer. And I say limited because it depends on what you're trying to do, whether it's painting or anything like that. You may not be able to get that to happen because you'll get like this little no symbol for your cursor. Because that means the layer is locked or the layer is invisible. So you can't affect that layer. Some filters will be, if you go to your filter menu up here, some of the filters will not be available to you, or all of them won't be available to you because the layer is locked that you're trying to apply it to, or it's the visibility is turned off. So you just be aware of that. If you ever run into that as an issue where you're trying to do something and it's not working, check the layers palette. What layer are you on? Is that layer locked? Is that layer's visibility turned off? If it's yes to any of those things, that's the problem. And you just got to fix it by doing what you need to do. So, visibility of the layer is simply just the eyeball being turned on or turned off. Now, this blue is slightly overlapping the red. Okay. So what can I do about that? If I wanted the blue to be behind the red, it's just the stack order of the layers. Right now, the blue layer here, that's the one at the top of this stack order list. So that's the thing that's the most in front of everything, in front of this picture, in front of that red color. If I change the stack order, which is simply clicking and dragging up and down, in the stack order in the layers palette, I can change the stack order, which will change what is in front and what is behind. Simple as that. So I can have the red be in front of the blue or be behind the blue. The thing that you will not be able to do is pull anything below the background layer. Your background layer is your locked bottommost layer. Nothing can go below this layer. So since nothing can go below this layer, I can't change the stack order of the background layer and still have it remain that way. Uh, you remember I talked about duplicating or, duplicating the layer in some kind of way. So Control J is what I just did. Now I can take this background copy and I can change the stack order of that, you know. So now I can move that up and down. But again, I can't pull this copy below the original background layer because, again, this background layer, the way it is, locked the way it is and such, bottommost layer, can't pull anything below it. All right. Visibility of layers, names of layers, stack order of layers. We covered all of those things. Clicking onto the name of the layer will select that particular layer, whatever it may be. Here's another thing that's important when it comes to that. When you're selecting something, like using like the rectangle marquee tool, if I make this rectangle selection right here, right, and I have the red layer selected, that means anything that I do is going to be applied to this red layer in this particular space of the marching ants. If I click on the blue layer, same thing now. On the blue layer is where I can paint or do something inside of these marching ants. So two rules are applying. A, the only area that I can affect right now is inside of the marching ants for my selection. And B, the only area that's going to be affected is what's on the particular layer I have selected. Pay attention to those things. I always talk about, well, I've talked about being methodical. Like when it comes to your tools, select the tool, set the options, then use the tool, right? That's slowing you down because if you go too fast, you will forget that you're doing something. You will forget some of the rules that you have to apply before you start doing things, and you're going to do something that you regret and don't like. For instance, if I wanted to, let's go with a different color here just to show you. If I wanted to paint over this space and I wanted to paint on the red layer, I got to select that red layer, and in that space, I'd be able to use my paintbrush to paint over that space on that red layer because that's where I have selected to put that information. But if I'm in a hurry, I got the blue layer selected and I start painting, then nothing is happening and I'm driving myself crazy. Like, why can't I paint in this space and nothing is happening? It's happening, but it's on the wrong layer because I'm on the blue layer painting all of that, not painting on the red layer like I wanted to. That's just an example of what can happen. Things like applying a filter or cutting or copying something or within that selected area or anything like that only can be applied to whatever layer you got selected at the time. That goes to your background layer too. So make sure that before you start doing something with the selection that you make, especially these shape-based selections like the lasso and the marquee tools, once you make that selection, you get that shape done, check which layer that you're on before you apply whatever it is that you're trying to apply in that space. So you're not, applying it to the wrong place and driving yourself crazy, because that can and will happen to you. Easily you can undo stuff, but it's just that annoyance of having to do that, especially multiple times because you keep forgetting. All right, moving forward. Um, let's get rid of the marching ants because I don't need those anymore. Let's talk about blending modes real quick and opacity, because it's another aspect of this layers palette here that we can go over. Top of the layers palette, you have normal. Normal is your blend mode. You have all of these different blend modes, and one of the good things about the blend modes in the layers palette is you can select a layer and that you want to apply the blend mode to. You can hit that drop down for normal, and then you can use the arrow keys on your keyboard to kind of go up and down with the list of the blend modes, and every one that you highlight, if you leave it there, it will show you what the blend mode is going to do. So visually, you'll be able to see what effect's going to happen with this particular layer and the blend mode that I picked here. So before you even land on a blend mode that you want to use, you can kind of review them all, kind of go through the list of them all and see what it's giving you. When you're experimenting, it's the best thing to do. You can experiment and kind of see what the effect happens and see what you like. Maybe you see something kind of cool. Maybe it's something that, is nice, but not quite what you need to do right now. So maybe you'll come back to it later for something else. Or maybe it's just completely terrible and you're just not going to use that, but you just know what it's going to do. So some of these blend modes, again, don't do anything particular because of the color you're using and what it's being applied to. And some of these blend modes do some very weird and wild things. All the blend modes affect every layer that's underneath the layer that you're applying the blend mode to. So I'm applying this blend mode to the red layer, which is above all the other layers. So it's going all the way down through to the final picture. It just stops at this background copy because it's a duplicate of the background file there. So it's kind of going down and stopping here, but it is technically going all the way through. Different blend modes do different things. Like I said, use those guides as kind of your idea of what you want the blend mode to do, and you pick and choose. There is no science. Well, there is a science to using the blend modes, but when it comes to which blend mode do you use for different scenarios and different things, that's almost non-existent, because I can show you that darken and lighten are just these different categories. So darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, and darker color. It just makes everything darker. Whereas lighten, all the way down here to lighter color, makes everything lighter. When you go overlay down to the hard mix, these are all contrast changes where it increases the contrast or sometimes decreases the contrast between the light and